that wasn't. When we say, I don't know, we're tempted to mean that we're unintelligent, right? Or uneducated. When we say those words, I don't know, it may even mean for a moment that we're confessing that life sometimes just doesn't make any sense, right? But that is what a not guilty verdict means. It means, in plain terms, we don't know, not for sure. Not for sure. Not guilty doesn't mean innocent. It can mean something different, right? And we've talked about that. If you say not guilty, you're saying as a group, as an individual, we don't know for sure. And in most real world situations, saying I don't know, that's not an acceptable answer, is it? To your boss, to a client. That's not acceptable. It is in the jury room. It is. And don't feel like you failed if that is your conclusion. Because again, the oath that you've taken as jurors compels you to say that if it's appropriate. Don't feel that you failed. In fact, it is your obligation to say those words if you believe they're true. You must only convict if there is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And if you have doubt, and quite frankly, in this case, you must, then it is your obligation to come through that door and stand before us all and say in substance, we don't know, not for sure. Thank you, Your Honor. Folks, in this life, we know a lot of things beyond a reasonable doubt, right? That Austinites love salsa, that we love our families, that it's raining when those rare drops fall from the sky, right? That the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. We know all of those things beyond a reasonable doubt. We know them to be true. But that Kaitlyn Armstrong is a murderer, that she committed this crime, do we know that? Are you certain? Do we know that for sure? Find her not guilty.
Yes, ma'am. But Rick, why is the defendant's Jeep in the alleyway? But Rick, why is the defendant driving around Maple Avenue for over an hour? But Rick, why does her Jeep start up more or less 2 minutes after Mariah Wilson is killed? But Rick, why does the defendant have a 9mm pistol that even the defense expert says is possibly the murder weapon and who the state's expert says is the murder weapon? But Rick, why does the defendant sell her Jeep, which we all know is evidence in a murder investigation, the day after she's told it's on video? But Rick, why does the defendant fly out of the United States using a fake name and a stolen passport to a different country where she uses fake names and goes and gets plastic surgery? But Rick, why is Colin Strickland on video at Pullburger when the Jeep is driving around downtown? But Rick, Mariah Wilson was fully clothed when she was murdered. So when was she sexually assaulted? But Rick, Mariah Wilson was on her phone the entire time she was at the apartment. So when was she sexually assaulted? But Rick, Colin Strickland was only at the apartment to pick up Mariah Wilson for about 7 minutes. But Rick, when did he have time to sexually assault her? And Rick, didn't they go out and have a nice dinner on video after the fact? So when did he sexually assault her? But Rick, isn't Colin Strickland on video at Pull Burger when the Jeep is driving around downtown? So how can he be driving it? But Rick, Colin Strickland's phone tells us that he's in South Austin at the time the murder happened. So how could he have killed Mariah? But Rick, why weren't you listening when Dr. Colifut, the state's DNA experts, explained that he had never heard of a 4-time transfer level that would be required for us to believe the defense DNA theory? But Rick, isn't it likely that every single passenger who rode in the black Jeep would likely leave DNA in the Jeep? And Rick, how would that be helpful? But Rick, I know the defense doesn't have any burden whatsoever in this case, but didn't you have a DNA expert that testified in this case? And why didn't you ask him to test the sexual assault kit? Why didn't you ask him to test the Jeep DNA swabs? But Rick, did the vandals know Mariah Wilson?
Objection, facts on evidence. We did ask, the state opposed, and the court denied the testing of that DNA evidence.
Judge, that is an absolutely flat out incorrect statement. The court said that the defense could test the sexual assault kit whenever they wanted to. And the defense didn't do it.
The district attorney opposed the testing.
That's
filed
not
such a
Judge.
motion.
I'm moving for the defense motion and the record of this happening in the court, in prior proceedings to be allowed for the jury to read it themselves.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence that has been admitted is what you will consider. The attorney's arguments are just that, argument. If it's not before you from this proceeding or from the witness stand, just recognize that the attorneys are basing their statements on their recollections and the evidence as they have viewed or believed it to be.
Thank
You may
you.
proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. There's no way that a prosecutor can stop a defense attorney expert from doing whatever they want with any kind of evidence. No way. There's no way that any judge would not allow that to happen. There's no evidence of that, and that's a flat out lie. Ladies and gentlemen, why, and maybe Rick can tell us, but apparently the vandals who vandalized the home knew Mariah Wilson, had access to the black Jeep and to Colin Strickland's laptop and got away with it. And Rick, you seem to be blaming this on Colin Strickland, but then you say you don't know who did it. Why can't you just stick to one simple, reasonable version of what happened? No one saw who murdered Mariah Wilson, but the evidence all points in just one direction: the defendant. And this case is all about what is reasonable, about common sense, and about the evidence. That's all I'm going to ask you to do. Be reasonable, use your common sense, and look at the evidence. Again, you heard the judge's charge. You have it with you. I urge you to read it. Reasonable doubt is not 100% certainty. It's not proof beyond all doubt. It's not proof beyond a shadow of a doubt. As jurors, your job is to go in the back and examine all the evidence and to discuss the evidence. And if you have questions, to talk and discuss about it. It's called deliberation. Please do that. Take your time. And I think that once you do that, the evidence is going to point to you the one direction that you all know it should be pointing in. It's at the defendant. The defendant is responsible for doing this. Quickly, there was a lot of talk about Colin Strickland's laptop, iPads, vandalism, but there was no talk of how that was relevant to this. I think the evidence is pretty clear, uncontradicted, that Colin Strickland was not at the crime scene when this happened. His phone said he was in South Austin. All the evidence says he was in South Austin. So should they have taken his laptop and put it through a full examination? Sure, why not? What relevance was that going to show to what happened here, ladies and gentlemen? He wasn't there. He was at home. Okay? It's simply what we call a red herring. It's Please take your eyes off the ball, ladies and gentlemen. Don't look at the evidence. Let's look at a laptop that wasn't tested. That's what they want you to do. All right? Same thing with the vandalism. What relevance is there? Did this person who committed the vandalism kill Mariah Wilson? Did that person somehow know Mariah Wilson all the way across town, drive the defendant's Jeep, have access to the defendant's gun? And by the way, apparently got away with it. So let me go vandalize the defendant's house so everybody will turn around and go, what happened? What relevance does that make? Does that make sense? Is there any reasonable explanation that makes sense that the defense attorney is urging you to go with? I want to talk to you quickly about the DNA evidence. Why is the DNA? Well, let's talk about the DNA evidence in the bike, okay? Specifically, defendant's DNA and Mo Wilson's bike. Defense has been asking you to speculate, okay? Speculate as to how it got there, because let's face facts, there's absolutely no evidence that you've heard in this courtroom, no evidence that would let you render an opinion, again, based on the evidence, about how the defendant's DNA got there. They've asked questions about something called transfer, and doesn't transfer happen, and can't that exist, and so on and so forth. And what if she was wearing Colin Strickland's helmet and she had breathed in it at some point, and then somehow it got on Mariah Wilson, and Mariah Wilson got it on her hands, and so on and so forth. All questions, no evidence whatsoever. But you heard from Dr. Califat, and Dr. Califat apparently was testifying when Mr. Kofer was not in the room, because Dr. Califat, I thought, was very compelling. He told you that he has extensive experience in this activity level regarding transfer issue with DNA, something that the other two witnesses didn't tell you. And he described in detail how he would look at these scenarios, the possibilities of somebody's DNA ending up on a bike. And what I thought was very interesting is that he told you that the proposition that the defense wants you to buy off on, that somehow the defendant was wearing Colin Strickland's helmet at some point in the past, that we have no idea when or evidence that even happened, and that somehow she might have coughed in the helmet. And then Mariah Wilson got that DNA from the coughing on her face or on her hair. Second transfer, first from the defendant to the helmet, now from the helmet to the face or hair of Mariah Wilson. Then Mariah Wilson touches her face or hair, the third transfer, and then Mariah Wilson goes into the apartment and puts her hand on the bike and puts the defendant's DNA. That's a 4-time transfer. I don't even want to try to use the word that he explained to you what it was. But what I do remember is he said he'd never even heard of such a thing. There was no studies that even indicated that. And what he told you, that if it was just a 3-level transfer, it would have been exceedingly unlikely. Okay? Because as he told you, and all the DNA experts told you, that when it comes to transfer, you have to take everything into account. And what we know here is that Colin Strickland rode his motorcycle from South Austin to the dentist on a hot day in May with his helmet on. Got off, presumably took off his helmet, because you're not going to go see your dentist with your helmet on. So he took it off, he parked his motorcycle, presumably walked to the dentist's office, opened doors, touched his hands on doors, presumably sat in a waiting area, presumably went into a dentist chair, put his hands on the dentist chair. So why didn't Colin Strickland get any of the defendant's DNA on? And if he did, why didn't he leave it all over? Why didn't he leave it in the dentist's room? Why didn't he leave it on the door to the dentist's office? Why didn't he leave it at a chair in the dentist's room? So then he left. He put his helmet on again on a hot day and drove all the way to East Austin in traffic. Okay. And again, the point of this is that Mr. Strickland, the owner of the helmet, the habitual using it, is gotta be, we've heard it, sweating and leaving mounds of DNA in his own helmet. Okay, that's what evidence, that's real evidence, because we heard that from the stand. Okay, Mr. Strickland told you he was wearing that helmet and it was a hot day in May. Then Mariah Wilson puts on the helmet. Okay, Mariah Wilson rides the motorcycle all the way to Deep Eddy with the helmet on. So any DNA that survived the Colin Strickland encounter, okay, this super powerful defendant DNA that survived the whole Colin Strickland activity level, now is being subjected to Mariah Wilson. And Mariah Wilson wears it and takes off her helmet and goes swimming. So this super strong defendant DNA that presumably had to rub off on Mariah Wilson the first trip to Deep Eddy is now on Mariah Wilson. Mariah Wilson goes swimming. You heard the expert said it's going to get washed off. Then she goes to eat. She's touching all kinds of things. She's at a table. She's eating food. And then she goes back and puts her helmet on and goes back. But somehow, in this strange world of possibilities, this super powerful defendant's DNA is still on the helmet. Okay, it's still there. And then, okay, if we assume that that's true, then we're subjected to this 4-time transfer that this expert has never, ever heard of. They want you to contort yourself and to twist yourselves and to bend yourselves into an unreasonable position in an attempt to make you to keep your eyes off the evidence. What I heard from the DNA expert is that the simplest, logical, most reasonable explanation for the DNA, for the defendant's DNA to be on this bike is this. As much as this hurt Rick's feelings, and thrown it in. Simplest, most logical, reasonable explanation. And I know Rick likes to say, well, why didn't she just carry it like this? But use your common sense. I think most people, even Colin Strickland says that this is the way most people carry it. And you heard the defendant has experience with bikes. So that's the most logical way I would assume she would be carrying the bike. And you know what is most impressive about this whole DNA thing before I move on? That not one bit of Colin Strickland DNA is on this bike. And you know why that's interesting? Because we've already talked about that Colin Strickland was the person who was wearing that helmet most of all. He wore it from South Austin to Northwest Austin. He wore it to East Austin. It was hot, so presumably he's sweating. Then we heard that Mariah Wilson was in close contact with him riding that bike. Her arms and her legs around him while they were riding that motorcycle. So when Mariah Wilson somehow magically transfers this super powerful defendant DNA onto this bike, why is there not one bit, why is there not one bit of Colin Strickland DNA? Not one bit. And you know the reason, ladies and gentlemen. You all know what the reason is. It's because Mariah Wilson didn't touch that. The defendant touched the bike after she exited. She took the bike out and she threw it outside. You heard from Steve Aston, okay? I submit to you, Steve Aston was a careful and deliberate examiner here, okay? He told you exactly what his results were. He showed you the results. And he told you that his results, his conclusions were not to the exception of every single firearm in the world. Okay, he told you that was just something that he can't testify, even though the defendant, defense attorneys gigged him into saying, but you're bucking the AFTE methods, and showed him on his laptop and said, but AFTE says you need to say that it's beyond the other gun, and he's beyond any other gun in the world. And he said, no, that's not the way to do it. That's the type of guy he was. And I don't want you to remember that this is the same guy that did say all 3 shell casings came from her gun. But out of the 3 projectiles, found one inconclusive. So I submit to you that Mr. Aston is not on any kind of a vendetta or trying to nail somebody or anything like that, because he wouldn't have testified in that way if that was in fact his agenda. I would also remind you that a second analyst, separate analyst, reviews all this and comes to the same conclusion. So it's not just Mr. Aston we're talking about. Now Mr. Tobin, very smart man, who I would submit also has a job that depends exactly on the type of testimony that you saw here, goes around the country testifying and didn't pay to that. He offered a lot of hyper-technical information. But what I took from this, and your recollection, talk to yourselves, I'm sure some of you guys have good notes. He said that firearms examination was one of the 3 most effective investigation tools that he knew. One of the 3 top investigative tools that he knew. That's from the man that apparently has not heard has nothing good to say about this field. But he admits that it's one of the top 3 investigating tools that he knows about. He didn't disagree with Mr. Aston's conclusions. Again, talk to each other, look at your notes. He said, I can't disagree with what his conclusions are. His major issue, and I asked him that, was with the issue of uniqueness, which what the defense attorney is calling individualization and had up here on the screen. Uniqueness. I don't think they should be saying that this is the only gun that could have done it. That's really what he was saying. I don't think they should say that. I don't disagree with his conclusions that this could have come from this gun. I just don't like them saying it's the only gun in the world that could have done it. But of interest was that when Mr. Tobin was in the FBI, apparently he did that very same thing. We talked about that article he wrote where he was able to take a piece of plastic and link it to the machine that made it. Isn't that what we're talking about? Linking bullets and shell casings to the machine, the gun that made it? He had no problems when he was with the FBI doing that. And he specifically told you, when I asked him, he used the word uniqueness in his article. Unique and uniqueness. That was Mr. Tobin when he was the FBI. What happened? I don't know. You get paid, you become a defense attorney. Look, I'm not going to question why or what the change of whatever took place in Mr. Tobin's mind. That's beyond me. I just think that it's something that was interesting and you guys should consider. I would also point out that after a lot of pushing and shoving, it turns out that a lot of the most prominent scientists in the world, the United States, disagree with what Mr. Tobin was saying. And you heard that. And we went from talking about somebody called Bruce Bedoli, Dr. Bruce Bedoli, who said, I may have heard of it, to, I got his report on my computer. If you give me a minute, I'll look for it. Okay? But this man, Bruce Bedoli, one of the most prominent DNA scientists in the world, I think that even the defense attorney expert was asked at one point, it might have slipped in you, if they knew who Bruce Bedoli is. And he said, oh, of course I did. Right? But those are the type of people that disagree with Mr. Tobin. So all I'm saying is, look, Mr. Tobin's entitled to his opinion, but don't accept it like it's gospel, like he wanted you to take it. There's equally as powerful and as smart and prominent people who disagree with him on this very issue. Okay? And as you heard, this subject is it's taught all over the United States and all over the world, and people testify to this all over the country and probably all over the world. That's all. I do want to mention of interest how all this evidence seems to be interlocked. And every time you turn around and try to go, well, maybe I'll give her another thought. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe or something. You run into the door and it has Kaitlyn Armstrong's face. And you know what that was? The one item that just jumped up to me? We got to go back to January 12th of 2022, right? Months before the killing. Defendants at the range in Austin, Texas, learning how to shoot her gun. All right, we've seen her on video. She apparently can hit a target at least 20 or so feet away, which, by the way, is more than enough of a distance to kill Mariah Wilson. And she buys a box of ammunition. Now, using your common sense, we all know that there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of different companies or boxes of ammunition. She picked the one box that had the same shell casings as that were recovered at the crime scene. The box of ammunition that she bought, she had the pick of the litter. She could pick any ammunition she wanted. She bought a box of Ammo Inc. ammunition that we all know now owns Jaeger, and that commonly when you open Ammo Inc. boxes of ammunition, they're full of Jaeger bullets or head stamps on Jaegerman's head stamps on the ammunition. And again, Jaegerman is what was found at the crime scene. I mean, you can't make this up. Every time you turn around, it's pointing at her. Detectives told you this was personal. Okay, this is from detectives at APD, and they explained the reasons. But you heard from the medical examiners. 2 shots to the head, 1 behind the ear, 1 in the face. And then another shot while the person was laying on the floor, through the chest, through the heart. Okay? Again, common sense and logic. If you're some unknown person who's not there for a personal reason, you just shot somebody twice in the head. Are you running? Are you getting the heck out of there? Are you taking additional time, crucial time for you to get away? Thank you. To walk up to somebody on the floor, bloody, and put 1 more in, right in the heart. And by the way, nothing's taken from this apartment. Nothing's kicked over. Nothing's pushed down. Nothing's broken. Nothing's gone. Except for what turns out to be really, this is Mariah Wilson, isn't it? Isn't that what the defendant sees here? That's Mariah Wilson. Mariah Wilson, the up-and-coming superstar cyclist, who my boyfriend is constantly talking to, who also is a superstar cyclist, and that I can never be. And that apparently that's something I will never be able to bridge, that connection between my boyfriend and this young 24-year-old up-and-coming superstar. This is Mariah Wilson. She knew that. She took the one thing that she hadn't done already. She already killed her. I'm taking this and I'm throwing out. Just kind of an extra, take that. She's viewing Mariah Wilson's profile and activity on Strava on May the 9th, on May the 10th, and on May the 11th. She's not a fan. She's not a fangirl of Mariah Wilson. We heard that from the people that know her best, her friends, and Colin Wilson. Why is she looking up Mariah Wilson 9, 10, 11? Why is she looking at Mariah Wilson 5 or 10 minutes after the last text exchange between Colin Strickland and Mariah Wilson, making plans, formalizing plans to go out? Why? Why is she searching through the profile to the 3rd level so she can see in every excruciating detail where Mariah Wilson was when she started and finished the run? And if we go back a little bit further, on May the 2nd, the day that she decides to suddenly fly out, or the decision is made to fly out to meet Colin Strickland in Arizona, why is she viewing Mariah Wilson's Instagram account? Why does she have this note in her phone, 1704 Maple, that we introduced the map about, and then deletes it? Why? Why, Rick? Why does she fly to Costa Rica? Why does she use her sister's passport? Why doesn't she use her own name? Why doesn't she use her own passport if this was just some innocent frolic to Costa Rica because that's what I can do. Why does she use fake names when she's in Costa Rica? Why does she desperately start looking for plastic surgery in Costa Rica? Okay? Why? Allison Page, Ari Roberts, who knows what else there is? These are all indications of guilt, ladies and gentlemen. Can we forget the search for pineapple juice and what it does to your fingerprints? This is somebody that's trying to hide themselves. They fled the country under a false name and not their passport, get to another foreign country, use fake names, and change their appearance. This isn't somebody on a frolic. This is somebody who's a fugitive and desperately trying to get away with it. This is the person that searched in Costa Rica articles that you saw that said Kaitlyn, some and such, and Kaitlyn Armstrong's wanted for murder in Austin, Texas. So she knew it. She knew it. That interview on May the 12th, that they urge you to believe it's just, well, common sense, and none of us would cooperate with the police after what they just did to us. I mean, of course not. The other side of the coin is, ladies and gentlemen, you have a police detective telling you, I want to talk to you about a murder of someone you know. And I have your boyfriend in the next room telling me you have issues with this person. Huh? It sounds suspicious or doesn't look good, or I'm sure there's another explanation. Look at the video. The detective wasn't pressuring her. I'm sure there's another explanation. Can you tell him? Your Jeep's there. She's dead. You seem to have a beef with her, and your Jeep's there. I don't want to talk to you. I gotta go. Because you brought me on a Class B misdemeanor. Common sense. What would you do? What would you do in that situation? That's all I'm asking. Would you say, nah, Colin Strickland or this mysterious person that we still don't know was driving my Jeep, or, I was running along my Jeep from South Austin to downtown while somebody else was driving my Jeep? Because apparently that's what they want you to believe. That somehow, I don't know why that matters, that the phone isn't in the Jeep, but they sure were next to each other for the whole, if they weren't inside, then they were sure right next to each other the whole time. And a simple explanation is we heard over and over again that GPS is more precise than the phone record. So if the phone is 20 feet away, you know what? GPS is more accurate. And if she chose to be in some parking lot with the Jeep running for 15 minutes, what does that got to do about why she killed Mariah Wilson? Keep your eye on the ball. That's all we're asking. Keep your eye on the evidence. All of these questions about MacBooks and sexual assault kits and why didn't they test the Jeep? Oh my God, what happened if somebody went into your car and took DNA? How many people's DNA do you think they would find? Every person that sat or was a passenger in your Jeep probably left DNA in there. And how does that move the ball here? Keep your eye on the ball. Okay? That's all I'm asking. And if you do, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at all of the evidence, look at it with common sense, logic, let the evidence take you where it's pointing. That's all I'm asking. You're going to find that the evidence is right there. That's the only place the evidence is pointing. From the Jag bullets to her running away 3 weeks ago before trial was later. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Executed Mariah Wilson in her friend's apartment, and then gave her one more for good. Thank you. This has been a long and sometimes tedious process. I know you guys are all paying close attention to what's going on. I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it. Do the right thing.
Your Honor, defense joins the state in their motion to release the sealed defense motion for forensic testing of evidence rape kit filed on October 12th, heard in a hearing before this court on October 13th. A readback of that transcript, including the state's